Welcome to this edition of Energy Independence Magazine. I'm your host, Sean Reynolds. On our program this afternoon, we will continue to investigate the serious issue of contractor fraud. My guests, Jim Reed and Brandon Lopez, are representatives from the Center for Contract Compliance, whose mission is, in part, to protect law-abiding employers from those who would attempt to gain an unfair advantage by failing to comply with minimum labor standards. In light of recently proposed legislation, and in today's competitive business environment, it has never been more important to have all the information possible in order to hire reliable, professional contractors at competitive prices. So we appreciate these gentlemen taking the time to speak with us today. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you.
Welcome to
Glad
the show,
be here.
Brandon.
Thank you. Glad to be here too.
Jim, let me start with you.
Yes.
So tell me what the main objectives of the CCC, the Center for Contract Compliance, are, and why is there a need for your organization?
The center was formed in mid-'80s, I think around 1985, and it was a local business manager from the local union that happened to start the center, realizing that the state was more of a reactive entity when it comes to compliance and on public works. So he gathered up several large general contractors, and they funded the starting of the organization. We primarily deal with labor codes 1720 through 1863, which is public works and prevailing wage, which also encompasses apprenticeship standards.
And Brandon, what are some of the agencies that you work with, and what specific roles do they play?
Some of the agencies we work with mainly are going to be the Labor Commissioner's Office. They handle the wage enforcement for all the state public works projects, and then the Department of Labor will handle wage enforcement for the federal projects. Now we do deal with the local district attorney's office and referring complaints over to them as well, but for wage compliance it's strictly usually the Labor Commissioner's Office.
On our last show, we had the Chief Deputy District Attorney Vicki Hightower for Riverside, and we discussed a growing concern out here was workers' compensation fraud.
Yes.
Now, do you deal? It was employer fraud. I'm sorry. Do you deal with employer fraud also?
On wages, all the time. That's primarily what we look at. But along with that, if they are violating the labor codes with regards to prevailing wage, if they're paying cash or underpaying prevailing wage, then they automatically affect the EDD and the Department of Insurance.
So walk me through some of these abuses. What might happen?
Right. So the workers' comp fraud usually gets kicked in later on in the investigation process. We'll investigate other issues, and these other issues just naturally, like Jim was saying, they come with the workers' comp fraud. So when an employer's misclassifying their workers, underpaying them on the prevailing wage rate. Once we turn that over to the district attorney's office, then they'll typically find violations of the workers' comp law.
Now, we spoke briefly before the show about AB 1897.
I'll let Brandon answer to that one.
Now, what exactly, this is the labor contracting client liability. It sounds pretty ominous. So what exactly does this entail?
I think it's a little bit more simpler than the law probably reads. But essentially what it's trying to do is shift liability from labor leasing organizations. So an organization like Labor Ready or Labor Finders, where they'll send out workers when a contractor calls and use extra people for a short period of time. And they'll lease these employees to the contractor. Well, what the law does, it's shifting liability for the wages for the worker to the contractor, and also for workers' comp is shifted between both of them, so not just one party has all the liability, so not just the leasing company anymore. So by doing that, hopefully it will allow a contractor to be more diligent in his operation and not try to hire these workers and knowing that they're not being paid correctly and not have the liability on them. So they're more responsible.
Brandon, how can a project manager choose the right contract? We went over this before, maybe calling your office. What are some of the other things that you think that they should do before they go out and decide on the lowest bid?
Are you referring to an awarding agency?
Yes.
A project manager?
Yes.
Well, to ensure that they're a responsible bidder would be that pre-qualification. And just to look into the history, a lot of the things that we find on a contractor, we just find it through Google. You type in a contractor's name and it'll pop up. If they've popped up on a city council agenda where a city council is discussing some kind of issue that they had on their project. So something just as simple as Google is better than what probably a lot of agencies do. They just look at the low number. In calling the references on their pre-qualification to see if they bid the project or did the project correctly.
You'll see on our website also that we do work closely with public agencies, cities, counties, school districts, as well as contractors, as well as workers. And one thing that we do with the cities, they call us often to kind of do a pre-qualification through our resources to see if we have any history with this contractor on any types of violations. So we do request a lot of information from the agencies. We always get certified payroll records. That's how we start an investigation. And so sometimes it seems that they get put off by all those requests, but in the long run, I think the ones that understand what we're doing see an advantage, and they know to call us and ask us if we have any kind of information on those contractors that are bidding their jobs.
So does it pay for these contractors? Are more of them getting away with it that are getting caught? Is it a problem that is growing?
You know, I think it's always going to be a problem in some respects because a lot of contractors will come in and out of public works and they won't stay a long time where they'll be on anybody's radar. But in the last couple of years, Jim and I were talking earlier, the state of California has made a lot of advancements with a lot of laws, and the district attorneys are actually prosecuting these cases now. And 5 years ago, that was really unheard of. So I think that it was probably always out there, and it may be growing just because the economy is growing, but the enforcement's getting stronger, so I think it's going to get better.
Well, this is a touchy question, but are there cities that try to get around this, that circumvent any of these laws?
I can answer that. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's many cities that try to do it. There's many cities that try to do the right thing, absolutely, but there are some cities that try to do whatever they can, either bend the law or just look at it in a different way so they could get around paying prevailing wages. One of the big issues recently have been charter cities. They have a charter city exemption to prevailing wage where if it's a municipal affair, they don't have to require prevailing wage on the project. And recently we've had a couple of determinations that we requested the DIR to look into some of these cities to see if they were doing it correctly. And the two that we've sent into DIR, they found that the cities were incorrectly bidding the projects out at non-prevailing wage rate. And in those cases, the cities are liable for all the wages, the difference between what the contractor paid his workers and what the correct wage would have been. So in the end, they didn't save any money. They got labor at a cheaper price, but they ended up paying the full price for it.
Now, Brandon, we spoke a little bit about these red flags. When a contractor is bidding on these jobs, when a public works official is bidding on these jobs, what kind of red flags can they look for if something's coming in too low?
Right. Well, just the number itself. When you look at a contractor's number, you don't necessarily just take it in isolation. You want to compare it to the second, third, and fourth bidder. If the second, third, and fourth bidder are all around a certain price and the number one bidder is, say, 20% lower, you really need to ask yourself, how is that possible? Is it the labor he's going to pay his workers less? Sometimes it's safety. And we investigated a contractor back in about 2008, 2009, where I brought this issue up to a Southern California city, where we argued safety was going to be an issue, and it was a pipeline project. And what ended up happening was that the contractor was trying to save money. His bid was about 25% lower than everybody else's, and he was laying a pipeline with no shoring. And the trench collapsed, and he killed a worker. And it was just something that the city was aware of at the beginning of the project. The second and third bidder were much higher but closer together. So you could kind of use the second and third, fourth bidder as a guide to where, if the number one bidder's in the ballpark of doing the project correctly.
And Jim, what are some of the ramifications for the project itself?
Well, I think there's been many studies done to show that if a contractor's willing to stoop so low and cheat his workers, and then along the same lines cheating the Employment Development Department, Department of Insurance, he's going to skip on materials as well, workmanship and materials. And I think that's proven itself many times. I know one project right here in Riverside where they actually expelled the contractor from the job because of such inferior work and materials that he was, and some threats I think he made to an inspector. So it just kind of goes along the line that if you're cheating someplace, you're cheating all over the place. And I think the cities find that as well when they get into a situation with a bad contractor.
And so at the end of the day, the project is going to suffer also.
Yeah, we think so. And I think just from a public standpoint, you want to have buildings that are sturdy and strong and built correctly. As I want to go over a bridge and make sure that it's not going to fall down. And all these things are correlated together. So one goes with the other one. You want to make sure that the electrical is done correctly. The building is not going to burn down. The concrete's not going to give way underneath too much weight on a bridge. So absolutely.
And one last time, Jim, it's important for the workers to make a prevailing wage, to have a decent life through their job. How would a worker investigate, report these abuses on his own? Give us that website one more time.
It's www.socalccc.org. And like I said earlier, our investigators are out in the field all the time, visiting public works projects, handing out flyers to workers, letting them know what wages they should be paid, talking to the workers, and then they will, they may or may not, but a lot of times they'll call us and they'll come in and we'll do a report and we'll start a case, open a case on it. So they can either contact us through the website or at our offices.
And if I could just jump in there, if I were going to give advice to a worker on what to do proactively, is just to keep records of what they do, what job site they worked on, what kind of tasks they're doing, if they're getting rest breaks, if they're getting meal breaks, when they start, when they stop, because all those things go into a worker's wage. So although it's not required to come forward later to have something like that, but when you have something like that, it really makes the investigation and enforcement and the likelihood that they're going to recover back wages so much better than if they didn't have it.
Well, thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Jim, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Whether considering new construction, large-scale expansions, energy-efficient upgrades, or minor retrofits, hiring the right contracting firm can be one of the most crucial decisions a company will face. The issue of fraudulent building practices is not new, but it is widespread and continues to be a major concern. Today, more than ever, it is important to hire the most responsible, ethical, and law-abiding contracting firm possible. The National Electrical Contractors Association, along with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, want you to make the best informed decision. So here at Energy Independence Magazine, we will continue to bring you the latest, up-to-date information on choosing the finest, responsible bidder. I'm Sean Reynolds. Thank you for watching.